The palace slept under a veil of darkness, the moonlight streaming through the tall windows of Buckingham like pale, silvery accusations. Inside, silence reigned, but in the corridors, it was a carefully curated illusion. Every polished floorboard, every gilded frame, every whispering tapestry seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the smallest disruption. Guard Lieutenant Rowan Hale moved quietly through the east wing, boots silent against the marble floors, eyes adjusting to shadows that concealed secrets as old as the monarchy itself. He had learned, over 17 years of unwavering service, that the true life of the palace thrived in the hours when the world outside slept, hours when whispers mattered more than proclamations, and a single misstep could echo through history. It was just past midnight when Rowan left his small resting quarters, called to patrol by a strange, uneasy instinct he could not ignore. The nightly schedule was routine, almost ritualistic. A circuit of staircases, an inspection of the outer gates, a quick check on the wings reserved for royalty. But tonight, the corridors felt heavier, as though they carried the weight of unspoken plans. The shadows pooled differently, and the usual hum of heating systems and distant water pipes seemed quieter, almost respectful of the tension that Rowan already sensed pressing against his chest. The Queen Consort's wing loomed ahead, dark and imposing, its doors tall and forbidding. Rowan's boots whispered across the floor, his uniform rustling ever so slightly with each step. He paused by a tapestry depicting King George V and Queen Mary, its painted eyes catching a glint of moonlight, seeming almost to follow him. Rowan shook off the chill that ran down his spine. It was just a painting, he reminded himself. Yet the palace had a way of imbuing even the inanimate with intention, a subtle language only those who had spent years within its walls could understand. As he approached the corner that led to Camilla's private chambers, he froze. Faint voices reached him, muffled but distinct, slicing through the calm night like steel through silk. Rowan pressed himself against the cool stone wall, heart tightening. Midnight was a time of privacy. Yes, but these were not ordinary conversations. There was urgency, almost imperceptibly layered with caution. One voice was unmistakably Queen Camilla's. Controlled, deliberate, commanding. The other was softer, hesitant, belonging to one of her aides, a junior officer or assistant he did not yet recognize. Rowan's instincts flared. Protocol dictated caution. Guards did not eavesdrop on royal conversations. But this was different. There was a tension here, a moral weight that demanded attention. He adjusted his stance, careful to remain unseen in the shadow of the corridor, every muscle coiled like a spring. The words he caught first were fragmentary, a partial command carried on the hush of secrecy. Ensure no one discovers this. Before the king sees, the palace cannot know. Not yet. He inhaled slowly, steadying himself. The implication was immediate. Orders of secrecy, potentially forbidden, were being issued at a time when the palace should have been in absolute dormancy. Rowan's mind raced through possibilities. Routine administrative discretion? Or something more consequential? Something dangerous? His pulse throbbed in rhythm with the distant ticking of a clock mounted in the grand hall. Whatever Camilla was orchestrating in the dead of night, it was hidden for a reason, and Rowan had stumbled upon it. The Queen's voice continued, low but sharp. No one is to touch it. If it leaves this room, there will be consequences. Severe consequences. Rowan's jaw tightened. The emphasis was not just on secrecy, it was on control, on authority, on the enforcement of her will in the most clandestine hours. Whatever object or information lay behind her chamber door, it was forbidden, protected not only by protocol, but by fear and influence. Rowan's training flared to life. He had to assess the risk without revealing his presence, to measure the situation with precision before making a decision. A rustle from inside the chambers indicated that her aide, or perhaps a junior officer, was complying, retrieving something from a hidden compartment or cabinet. Rowan could not see exactly what, but the movement was deliberate, careful, almost reverent. He could sense the tension in the air, the weight of moral and historical responsibility pressing on all participants, even those unaware of their roles in a potential scandal. The palace, in its moonlit silence, seemed to lean toward him, compelling him to act, to observe, to decide where loyalty truly belonged. Then a sound startled him, a soft, metallic click. Rowan's breath hitched. The queen consort had engaged some form of lock or mechanism, something designed to conceal what lay beyond. The candlelight flickered across the polished floors, casting shadows that stretched and distorted as though alive. Rowan's eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary late-night task. The secrecy, the precision, the insistence on forbidden measures, it all pointed to something significant, potentially explosive. Camilla's tone sharpened, authoritative and commanding. "You will leave no trace. No one can follow. The moment anyone suspects, it must be hidden. Do you understand?" The aide's whispered response was lost to the corridor, but Rowan imagined the nod, the trembling compliance. One wrong step, one slip, could turn a carefully concealed order into chaos. Rowan's chest tightened, and he gripped his baton, silently prepared to intervene if the situation escalated beyond moral bounds. His mind raced with the implications. He had protected the palace through storms, public unrest, and demanding ceremonial duties, but never had he found himself at the center of such a complex and deeply personal matter, unfolding in the quiet hours of the night. The queen consort's instructions were not routine. They were sensitive, discreet, and tied to matters of considerable importance within the household. Rowan felt immediately that he was not simply observing. He was a quiet presence with a role to play, a steady guardian prepared to support whatever challenges might emerge from the weight of human intentions and choices. The faint flicker of candlelight revealed the shadows of a figure moving toward what Rowan realized was a hidden compartment, a secret chamber designed to shield knowledge, objects, or both. Rowan's pulse surged. The queen consort's midnight operations were deliberate, precise, and shielded from even the most trusted eyes. If discovered, the repercussions could be immediate and far-reaching. Every fiber of his being screamed that he must remain unseen, yet vigilant, prepared for the moment when discretion would demand courage. Minutes passed, each drawn out with agonizing slowness. Rowan's senses, honed over nearly 2 decades of palace service, were acute. The palace seemed to thrum with tension, walls pressing inward, shadows shifting as though aware of the forbidden act occurring within its heart. Then Camilla's voice, soft but carrying unmistakable finality, pierced the silence. "No one is to know until the king himself approves. Seal it, conceal it, and leave no evidence. The palace must remain undisturbed." Rowan's hands tightened on his baton. He had heard the forbidden order, an edict of secrecy that defied ordinary protocol, issued in the dead of night, and he now faced the unspoken challenge. Whether to act, remain a silent witness, or intervene to protect the palace, the crown, and the innocent from potential disaster. He crouched further into shadow, breath steady, eyes locked on the chamber door. The queen consort's aide retreated silently, leaving Camilla alone with the concealed object. Rowan's mind raced. Every instinct urged caution, but the moral tension was undeniable. Secrets could be safe, yes, but at what cost? The crown, the palace, and the very idea of justice and loyalty hung in delicate balance. Rowan's training, his years of service, and his deep respect for both authority and morality coalesced in a single point of awareness. He had witnessed something forbidden, something consequential, and he would need to decide, carefully, when and if to act. The palace was silent once more, yet Rowan knew the quiet was fragile, temporary, and pregnant with the threat of revelation. The queen consort had issued her midnight orders, and the consequences would ripple far beyond these walls. Rowan's eyes lingered on the door, shadowed and secretive, understanding that what came next would demand not only vigilance, but courage, discernment, and unwavering dedication to the principles that defined his life in service to the crown. The palace slept, but he did not. Rowan Hale remained pressed against the cold stone wall, his uniform blending with the shadows of the East Wing corridor. The palace, usually a place of ordered routine, seemed to hold its breath around him, the polished floors absorbing the faintest sounds and amplifying every creak of unseen footsteps. Even the distant drip of water from the roof gutter outside seemed louder in the stillness, punctuating the tension that had taken root in the queen consort's wing. Rowan's pulse was steady, trained to maintain control, yet every nerve hummed with the knowledge that he had witnessed something forbidden, something that could shift the delicate balance of loyalty, authority, and secrecy. In Buckingham Palace, a sudden noise drew his attention, a soft, hurried shuffle behind a tapestry on the far side of the corridor. Rowan's hand went instinctively to the baton at his side. He crouched slightly lower, careful to remain hidden, and listened. The shuffle repeated, accompanied by a faint metallic click, almost imperceptible but precise. Someone was moving in these private corridors without authorization. Rowan's brow furrowed. At this hour, every step, every sound, was a potential signal of disturbance. His instinct screamed caution. The figure emerged from the shadow near the wall. A young staff member, perhaps a page or junior aide, moving quickly, almost frantically. Rowan recognized her instantly. Marianne Price, one of the Queen Consort's newest assistants, tasked with deliveries and document transfers late into the night. She clutched a small satchel tightly, her shoulders hunched, her eyes darting nervously down the corridor. Something about her posture, the way she moved with almost panicked urgency, suggested she was carrying more than ordinary correspondence. Rowan's gut tightened. He had seen this tension before, in situations where the palace itself seemed to hum with hidden danger. Marianne paused at a doorway leading to a seldom-used antechamber. She leaned in, listening carefully, before crouching to adjust something beneath a floor panel. Rowan could not see exactly what she did, but the faint metallic glint that caught the candlelight suggested a hidden mechanism, perhaps a lock or latch. The action was delicate, precise, and purposeful, nothing done hastily. Rowan's pulse quickened. Whoever had given these orders had done so with the expectation of secrecy, and he now realized he had stumbled onto not one, but two clandestine operations in the Queen Consort's wing. He remained perfectly still, his eyes scanning the shadows for any hint that he had been noticed. The palace, in its grand silence, seemed to almost pulse around him, responding to the tension he carried. Rowan's mind raced. Protocol demanded that he report unusual movements immediately, yet instinct warned that intervention might alert the Queen Consort or her staff prematurely, potentially causing a ripple of chaos or drawing attention to the forbidden orders he had overheard. His duty was to protect the palace, its occupants, and its secrets. But tonight, that duty required patience and observation, not action. Marianne finally withdrew the hidden latch, revealing a small compartment beneath the floorboards. She carefully placed the satchel inside, pressing the panel back into place with an audible click that sent a shiver down Rowan's spine. The precision, the secrecy, the hushed efficiency all pointed to something far more critical than routine correspondence or mundane documents. Rowan's heart hammered against his ribs. Whatever had been issued by Queen Camilla under cover of night now rested hidden within the palace itself, and the weight of its forbidden nature pressed heavily on him. Suddenly, a muffled voice drifted from the Queen Consort's private chambers. Camilla herself. Her tone was low but unmistakably commanding. Ensure it remains undiscovered. This must not leave the palace walls. Understand? Marianne's whispered response was nearly swallowed by the shadows. Rowan could not hear the words, but he understood the obedience implied. The tension was palpable, a moral crucible in which the young aide was already being tested. Rowan's protective instincts flared. She was inexperienced, loyal, and entirely unprepared for the moral and emotional weight of the task she had been assigned. He moved slightly, adjusting his position to maintain the best vantage point. Every sense was alert, the faint rustle of fabric, the whisper of breath, the distant tick of the grand hall clock. The palace itself seemed alive with anticipation, as if aware that the integrity of its secrets rested on the actions of a single unseen observer. Rowan's mind catalogued every detail. The direction of Marianne's movements, the subtle shift of the floor panel, the cadence of the Queen Consort's voice, the way the shadows seemed to pulse around the hidden compartment. It was a scene of suspense and subtle drama, unfolding entirely beyond the knowledge of the sleeping palace. As Marianne withdrew from the hidden compartment, Rowan noticed her hesitation. Her hand lingered near the satchel, as if reluctant to let go, as if aware that the object she carried might carry consequences far beyond her understanding. The air seemed to thicken. Rowan felt the moral dilemma pressing on him with unprecedented intensity. Intervene to protect the young aide, expose the hidden orders, or continue to observe in silence while maintaining the palace's fragile equilibrium. Each choice carried risk, each hesitation a potential spark for disaster. The corridor remained empty, yet Rowan's trained eyes caught movement at the far end, a shadow, almost imperceptible, creeping closer, deliberate but cautious. He recognized the step immediately. Another palace staff member, moving silently, perhaps suspicious, perhaps drawn to the same secret that had occupied Marianne. Rowan's chest tightened. The hidden compartment, the forbidden midnight orders, and now a second potential intruder created a dangerous convergence. He had to remain hidden, yet prepared, ready to act if the equilibrium broke. Marianne turned toward the sound, her eyes wide with alarm. Rowan could almost feel her heartbeat through the tension radiating from her small frame. She adjusted the satchel once more, clutching it to her chest, and moved to retreat down the corridor. Her movements were careful but rushed, betraying her fear of being discovered. Rowan followed at a precise distance, every footfall measured, every shadow considered. The moral calculus weighed on him. Protect the innocent, preserve the secret, maintain order, and prepare for any escalation that might come from the Queen Consort's forbidden directives. The muffled sound of another voice joined the tension, low and indistinct, but unmistakable. The Queen Consort was speaking again, issuing further orders to her staff. Rowan's jaw tightened. The forbidden nature of these midnight instructions, combined with the clandestine activity of her aides, suggested that the secret was not only valuable, but potentially dangerous. He understood instinctively that if anything went wrong, the consequences could ripple across the palace, affecting not only the hierarchy, but the safety and reputation of the entire royal family. Minutes stretched, each heavy with suspense. Rowan maintained his vigil, moving silently to ensure Marianne's retreat remained undisrupted. Every creak of the floorboard, every flicker of candlelight, every muffled whisper heightened the stakes. The moral weight of what he had observed pressed on him more heavily than any ceremonial duty, more intensely than any previous test of loyalty. The palace, cloaked in moonlight and shadow, had revealed a hidden thread of forbidden orders, and Rowan was the only witness to its unfolding. Finally, Marianne reached a secluded stairwell leading to the service mezzanine. The satchel clutched tightly against her chest. Rowan remained behind the shadow of a tapestry, observing, ready to intervene if anyone approached. The young aide disappeared from view, leaving only the faint echo of her footsteps. The corridor seemed to exhale in relief, or perhaps anticipation. Rowan's senses remained sharp. The Queen Consort's orders had been executed, but the consequences were far from resolved. The palace held its breath, waiting, as Rowan prepared for the moment when secrecy would collide with duty, and when the full weight of Camilla's forbidden midnight orders would demand action. Rowan Hale's pulse continued to thrum in the shadowed corridor as he observed Marianne's retreat up the narrow stairwell. His instincts screamed that the Queen Consort's forbidden midnight orders were no longer simple instructions. They were part of a larger, more dangerous plan. The satchel she carried, small but clearly weighted with purpose, suggested an object or documents of immense significance. Rowan knew, without needing confirmation, that whatever Camilla had ordered hidden had the potential to disrupt not only palace protocol, but the very trust that held the royal household together. Every step Marianne took resonated like a warning bell, echoing down the hallways of Buckingham and amplifying the tension that already gripped him. Camilla's voice rose again, though softly, measured to carry through closed doors, but not beyond. Ensure it reaches the archive room. No one else must touch it. If the king is to be informed, it will be through me. Do not fail me. Rowan stiffened. The Queen Consort's words were precise, deliberate, and sharp with unspoken consequences. She was issuing not only orders but moral tests, each one loaded with potential fallout. The silence of the palace, usually a reassuring backdrop, now pressed against Rowan's chest, the weight of secrecy almost tangible. He followed Marianne at a careful distance, every movement silent, every shadow considered. Rowan's mind raced through the implications. If the satchel contained documents or artifacts that Camilla considered too sensitive to reveal, then the Queen Consort's decision to act at midnight outside of normal protocol was already a breach of expected authority. Yet Rowan also understood that she wielded her power deliberately, anticipating resistance, testing loyalty, and ensuring obedience. His moral and professional judgment hung in delicate balance. Intervene, and he risked defying the queen. Remain passive, and he risked allowing a potentially dangerous secret to move unchecked through the palace. Marianne paused at a corner near the East Wing library, looking over her shoulder nervously. Rowan pressed himself against the wall, unseen, and watched her hands tremble as she adjusted the satchel. The queen's orders, so carefully worded, had created a tension that manifested physically in her aides. Rowan's own pulse accelerated. He could almost feel the weight of the moral dilemma pressing down on him. He had been a guard for nearly 2 decades, trained to protect, observe, and anticipate, but this was different. This was not a matter of ceremonial security or public protocol. This was secrecy, moral judgment, and potential scandal all wrapped into one fraught, fragile moment. Then a sound cut through the corridor, a soft, deliberate knock at a distant door. Rowan's head snapped toward the noise, instincts alert. It was someone moving late at night who should not be here, another staff member. Perhaps curious, perhaps suspicious, perhaps guided by orders of their own. The metallic click of a latch followed, and Rowan understood immediately that the palace's quiet order was under silent assault from multiple directions. He adjusted his stance, baton ready, mind racing with possible contingencies. One wrong step could trigger a cascade of exposure, fear, or confrontation. Camilla's voice reached him again, lower, almost a hiss. Do not deviate. Every moment of hesitation risks discovery. Complete the task and leave no trace. Rowan's jaw tightened. The queen consort's insistence on secrecy, on forbidden action, was deliberate and unyielding. He had heard her issue commands to aides before, but never in a manner that carried such moral weight, such latent danger. Rowan's mind catalogued every nuance. The cadence of her voice, the precise instructions, the careful handling of an unseen object. He felt the moral tension coiling in his chest, a weight he had never experienced so sharply in his long service. Marianne reached the library, her movements cautious, yet hurried. She knelt to place the satchel beneath a stack of secured documents in a small, unassuming cupboard. Rowan's trained eyes recognized the significance of the placement. It was deliberate, a calculated concealment, meant to avoid casual detection while preserving access for the queen consort. Rowan exhaled slowly. The immediate danger was not to the young aide herself, though her inexperience was evident, but to the integrity of the palace's secrets, the sanctity of its authority, and the chain of loyalty that bound everyone within its walls. Then Rowan heard a soft intake of breath, almost imperceptible, followed by the queen's unmistakable voice again, sharper now, carrying subtle irritation. Ensure that no one learns of this before the king. If anyone approaches, delay, misdirect, or deny. Do you understand? Marianne nodded rapidly, voice trembling. Rowan's heart tightened. The orders were forbidden in their timing, secretive in their execution, and fraught with potential consequences that could ripple through the palace and the public alike. He knew instinctively that the moral challenge had escalated. This was no longer merely a matter of observation. It was a test of judgment, loyalty, and courage. A sudden creak from the corridor alerted Rowan. He pressed himself further into shadow. Another figure approached, slower, deliberate someone, moving cautiously, aware but uncertain. His trained gaze caught the glint of metal. The figure carried keys. Perhaps a flashlight. Perhaps simply exploring. Rowan's instincts flared. Whoever this newcomer was, they could unintentionally interfere with the queen's midnight orders, expose Marianne, or reveal the concealed satchel. Every instinct screamed vigilance, and Rowan's hand rested firmly on his baton, ready to step in at a moment's notice. Marianne rose to leave the library, her movements tense, careful, each footstep measured. Rowan mirrored her pace at a distance, silently observing. He noted the way she clutched the satchel, the slight shiver in her shoulders, the anxious glance she cast at the corridor. He understood her fear intimately. Inexperienced, loyal, and burdened by the queen's forbidden instructions, she was caught in a moral web she did not fully comprehend. Rowan's chest tightened. He had to remain unseen, But he could not abandon his protective role. If anyone interfered, she was vulnerable. If the secret was exposed prematurely, the consequences could be severe. The Queen's orders, carefully issued in the dead of night, had set a moral and political trap. Rowan's mind cataloged the possibilities. Discovery by another aide, an accidental confrontation with a family member, even the potential of public exposure if the satchel moved beyond the palace walls. He weighed every option, intervened too soon, and he risked defying the Queen and compromising his duty. Wait too long, and he risked catastrophe. The corridor, the shadowed stairwells, and the hidden library all became a stage for a delicate balancing act, where morality, loyalty, and courage would collide in ways he could not yet predict. Finally, Marianne reached a small service staircase, her breath shallow, eyes wide with the tension of her mission. Rowan followed, remaining in shadow, aware of every step. The satchel pressed against her chest, the weight of forbidden midnight orders now visible in her posture, in her movements, in the tremor of her hands. Rowan's chest tightened further. He had witnessed the Queen Consort's directive, observed its execution, and understood its potential consequences. The moral dilemma was acute. When to act, how to protect, and how to maintain both secrecy and loyalty without triggering disaster. As Marianne ascended the final steps toward a secluded mezzanine, Rowan adjusted his grip on the baton, muscles coiled, senses heightened. The palace, shrouded in moonlight and silence, seemed alive with tension. Every shadow, every creak, every whisper of fabric was a potential signal of danger, a moral alarm. Rowan knew that the forbidden midnight orders had placed the palace on the edge of crisis. And now, as the young aide reached the hidden chamber where the satchel would be delivered, the full weight of his role became clear. He was both observer and guardian, the only barrier between secrecy and exposure, between loyalty and moral compromise. The stage was set. The palace, the Queen Consort, the young aide, and the silent guard now existed in a fragile equilibrium, poised on the knife's edge of revelation. Rowan's instincts flared. One wrong move could unravel everything. One moment of hesitation could ignite chaos. The moral and emotional stakes had reached their peak, and the forbidden midnight orders were about to confront not only the loyalty of those within the palace, but the very principles that Rowan had dedicated his life to protecting. The palace seemed to exhale as Rowan Hale followed Marianne up the narrow service stairwell. The shadows stretched long and dark across the walls, flickering with the pale light of distant lamps, and every creak of the steps beneath their feet sounded like a warning. Rowan's senses were taut, his muscles coiled like springs. He had observed forbidden midnight orders executed in silence, tracked the young aide carrying a satchel of unknown yet undoubtedly critical contents, and now he approached the moment where discretion would collide with danger. The air itself felt thick, heavy with anticipation, as though the palace recognized that something momentous was unfolding within its walls. Marianne reached the secluded mezzanine, her hands trembling slightly as she approached a heavy, unassuming door at the far end. Rowan remained in shadow, observing. The door led to a small chamber rarely used by staff, one that Camilla had apparently designated for secrecy. Marianne paused before it, glancing nervously down the corridor as if expecting some unseen authority to emerge. Rowan understood. The Queen's orders had placed her in a position of immense responsibility, yet left her utterly unprepared for the consequences of a misstep. Rowan's jaw tightened. He could not intervene without risking exposure, yet his protective instincts flared. The moral stakes had reached their peak. She inserted a small key into the lock, hesitated, then turned it with precision. The door opened just enough for her to slip inside. Rowan pressed himself against the wall, careful to remain unseen. From within the chamber came a faint rustle, the soft sound of the satchel being placed carefully on a low pedestal. Rowan's eyes caught the glint of metal beneath the fabric, the faint shimmer of something valuable, perhaps historical, perhaps political, but undoubtedly powerful. He swallowed hard. The Queen Consort's forbidden orders were now fully revealed in their execution, and Rowan understood with acute clarity that the consequences of discovery by anyone could be catastrophic. A sudden whisper froze him in place. "Ensure no one comes near." "Not now. Not ever." The voice was unmistakable. Camilla, though not present physically, had left her authority echoing in every movement, in every instruction Marianne followed. Rowan's mind raced. The queen consort's words carried threat, guidance, and moral weight. He had seen her command authority before, but never layered with such secrecy and potential peril. The satchel rested on the pedestal like a ticking clock, each moment carrying the threat of exposure, scandal, or confrontation. Rowan crouched further into shadow as the door creaked slightly again, signaling the approach of another figure, someone moving silently, carefully, yet with intent. He tensed, hand on baton. Another staff member? A curious family member? Or perhaps a higher-ranking aide, drawn by the forbidden nature of the orders? The palace's corridors, usually calm and predictable at this hour, now thrummed with moral tension. Every step was a potential spark, every breath a possible alarm. Rowan knew instinctively that intervention might be required at any moment, though discretion remained paramount. From the chamber came another sound, a soft click as Marianne secured the satchel within a compartment hidden beneath the pedestal. The movement was deliberate, precise, almost ceremonial. Rowan's pulse quickened. Whatever it contained was not only valuable, but carried a level of importance he could feel in the air. He understood that the Queen's late-night instructions, delivered outside the usual routines, had placed everyone involved in a situation that demanded utmost care. If mishandled, the consequences could create serious tension, spark disagreement, or strain long-standing confidence within the household. A sudden rustle behind him drew Rowan's attention. He pivoted slightly, catching the shadow of someone moving cautiously down the corridor. His breath caught. The palace had shifted from routine calm to suspenseful theater. He could not yet see the figure clearly, but instinct told him they were drawn to the same secret that Marianne had delivered. Rowan's hand tightened around his baton. One step wrong, one discovery, and the balance of secrecy and loyalty could collapse. Marianne exited the chamber carefully, glancing over her shoulder. Rowan followed, maintaining a measured distance. Every muscle in his body was attuned to the shadows, every sense on alert. The satchel pressed against her chest, a silent testament to the Queen's forbidden orders and the moral weight they carried. Rowan's mind catalogued every detail, the cadence of her steps, the subtle quiver of her hands, the direction of her gaze. He understood that the palace, usually a place of predictable hierarchy and routine, had become a stage for moral and ethical tension, where loyalty and courage were tested in silence. Suddenly, a voice cut through the corridor, sharp, controlled, unmistakably authoritative. "Marianne!" Rowan froze. The tone was not hostile, but it carried the undeniable weight of command. Marianne's eyes widened, panic momentarily flashing across her face. Rowan's pulse surged. Whoever had called her could discover the forbidden orders, the hidden satchel, or both. He moved slightly closer, hidden in shadow, prepared to intervene if necessary. The figure emerged. It was Lieutenant Alan Green, another guard, senior yet not privy to the Queen Consort's late-night instructions. He carried a lantern that flickered across the walls, revealing the glint of metal and the anxious expression on Marianne's face. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Green asked, his voice low but firm. Rowan held his breath. This was the moment where intervention might become unavoidable. He could not allow the satchel or the hidden compartment to be compromised. Marianne stammered. I was just delivering documents, sir. The Queen Consort, she instructed me." Green's eyes narrowed, suspicion etching every line of his face. Rowan, pressed against the shadowed wall, recognized the danger immediately. One misstep, one incomplete explanation, and the forbidden nature of Camilla's midnight orders would be revealed. His moral and professional instincts flared. He had to act, protect, and maintain secrecy, all at once. Rowan stepped lightly from the shadows, his presence sudden yet deliberate. Green turned, startled. Rowan's voice was low, authoritative, and calm. "Everything is under control. Let her pass." Green hesitated, the lantern trembling slightly in his hand. Rowan's eyes held steady. The moral weight of the moment, the responsibility for discretion and protection, radiated from him in silent authority. Green finally nodded, muttered an acknowledgement, and moved along the corridor, unaware of the full scope of the secret he had almost uncovered. Marianne exhaled shakily, pressing the satchel closer. Rowan offered a brief, reassuring nod. He could feel the tension leaving her body slightly, though the fear remained. Together, they descended the service stairwell, silent guardians of a secret that could shake the palace if revealed. Rowan's mind catalogued the events of the night, the forbidden orders, the hidden compartment, the moral test imposed on the young aide, and the danger of accidental exposure. Every element was a thread in a delicate web, each one capable of unraveling with a single misstep. As they reached the lower corridor, Rowan glanced toward the chamber one last time. The door, closed and unassuming, concealed the satchel and the queen's secret with unnerving precision. The palace, in its silence, seemed almost aware of what had occurred. Rowan felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, heavier than any ceremonial duty or public obligation. The forbidden orders had been executed, yet their consequences remained unresolved. The corridors now felt different, charged, alive, almost anticipatory. Rowan's instincts flared. The palace had been silenced by the weight of Camilla's secret, yet he knew this quiet was temporary. Someone, somewhere, would eventually question, discover, or confront the consequences of the midnight orders. And when that moment came, the delicate balance of loyalty, secrecy, and morality would be tested, and Rowan would be at the center of it, prepared to act, protect, and navigate the treacherous waters that the queen consort had orchestrated. The satchel secured, the young aide guided safely to a quiet corner, Rowan exhaled slowly. He had witnessed, observed, and intervened only where necessary. The palace, once calm and predictable, had been thrust into a silent drama, a moral and ethical test that few would ever know had occurred. The forbidden midnight orders were executed, but their impact had only just begun to ripple outward. Rowan's gaze lingered on the shadowed corridor, aware that the night's events would not remain hidden for long. Somewhere deep in the palace, a soft sound of movement echoed a distant door creaking. The faintest whisper of footsteps. Rowan stiffened. The silence of the night had been punctured, subtly, almost imperceptibly, and he knew instinctively that this was only the beginning. Camilla's secret, the forbidden orders, and the hidden satchel had already begun to ripple through Buckingham Palace, and the consequences would soon demand attention, courage, and unwavering loyalty. Rowan stepped back into the shadows, vigilant, silent, and morally resolute. The palace had been silenced by secrecy, yet the story was far from over. Every corner, every echo, every flicker of candlelight held the potential for revelation. And Rowan, the guard who had overheard the queen consort's forbidden midnight orders, would stand at the center of the storm when it arrived.